This is going to be a long ass video, isn't it? So we now have 70 different Final Fantasy games to tier list. I have played the vast majority of these games, which is kind of scary in and of its own right, and I've got some real obscure ones in there. And I'm sure I've missed one or two, and I'm sure people in the comments will let me know whether I've missed one or not. But if you want the ultimate tier list for Final Fantasy, then stay tuned and keep on watching. So, quick disclaimer, I have titled this ranking 70 Final Fantasy games rather than ranking every Final Fantasy game, purely on the back of the fact that making all of these icons took rather a long time, and I'm sure there's going to be one or two that I've missed. I'm going to go quickly over ones that I've specifically left out. I have not put Final Fantasy Adventure in this list because then it leads on to, well, does that mean that every other Mana game is a Final Fantasy? And the same goes for Saga as well. So I'm going to kind of just avoid those entirely. And also, when it comes to each version of each game, I'm kind of going with the most up-to-date version, or at least a collective opinion of the things that they all have in common, because I don't want to be going into Final Fantasy 1 GBA version, PSP version, NES version, Wonder Swan version. Otherwise, it's just going to get way too heavy to manage. This is similar to a list that I made recently, and I'm going to start the list off by putting everything where I had it before. If you want to watch my list of the first of the main 16 games plus FF7 Remake, then by all means go ahead and watch that video as well. So we're going to start with Final Fantasy XII Revenant Wings. Now, I don't think that FF12 Revenant Wings is a bad game as such. And by the way, much like the last video, I am going to be doing a makeup look while we do this as well. So just going with foundation. I don't think it's a bad game. I think the problem with Revenant Wings is that it's ultimately very forgettable, which in a pantheon of games like this is a death sentence. I don't think the story is anything to write home about, but if you really love FF12, there's a lot to like for, you know, more exploration of Vaan and Penelo as characters. And some of the characters that are in Revenant Wings, like Fiolfanos and Lou, they're quite cool. Kites obviously gets a lot more attention in that game as well. I think it's okay. It's an okay game. I just don't think it's really good. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in high C tier. Now we have Final Fantasy 13-2. I'm going down this list sort of one by one because otherwise it's going to be horrific. I would put 13-2 at, I'd say, the bottom of B tier. And I'm quite happy with that because I think that, just under 13. I think that 13 is slightly better than 13-2 is, although a lot of people would disagree with me. And as I said in my previous video, I welcome disagreement. I really want people to kind of have their own opinions with Final Fantasy, because Final Fantasy, part of the magic of this franchise is the fact that everyone's opinions are so vastly different from one another. I think it's amazing that that's the case. But while I think with 13-2, the story is a bit better, I don't really like a lot of the characters in 13-2. I find Serra and Noel quite annoying. I find the Pokemon kind of systems fairly irritating. It's my least favorite of the 13 group, but it's still not a bad game. It's still not a bad game. So I'm happy to put it at low B tier. Okay, so now we have our first sort of spicy pick here with Final Fantasy VII The First Soldier. I'm going to put it straight in the D tier because it's not playable anymore. But I would have said it was D tier anyway. I did play First Soldier for a little while. It was okay, but it was a live service game. Its marketing was horrendous. It didn't even last a year. So I don't think it really deserves to be anywhere other than D tier, but it makes me sad because I think the potential was there. It just needed either a PC release or it needed a little bit more love in the oven. So yeah, it's a D tier one. So we're going to go into 4 After Years now. So 4 After Years was featured in Complete Collection. It was going in all sorts of other things. I'll be honest with you, I can't stand After Years. I think that Final Fantasy IV The After Years is literally just Final Fantasy IV, but worse in every way. The characters aren't as interesting. Theodore is not Cecil. The ending is absolutely garbage. The combat is just... It's just FF4, but not quite as good. Nothing about FF4 After Years screams out to me saying, yes, I love this, it's really good. It's just, everything is the Diet Coke. There you go, the comment there, Theodore is Diet Cecil. It's the Diet Coke of Final Fantasy IV, and it's completely bland. It just has no flavor, to continue the Coca-Cola reference. It has no flavor, and for that reason I'm putting it in D tier. Right, so now we have Final Fantasy The Four Heroes of Light, which was on the DS. Four Heroes of Light is okay, and honestly I was hesitant to put this on this list, because if Four Heroes of Light deserves to be on this list, then surely Bravely Default does, because Bravely Default is literally a successor to this game. And if Bravely Default's allowed to go on there, Bravely Default is S tier, and I don't care what anyone else says. I love that game so much. It's one of my favorite Final Fantasies that isn't a Final Fantasy. But we're not talking about Bravely, we're talking about Four Heroes of Light. I'm going to put Four Heroes of Light at the low end of B tier, because I think it establishes a lot of really cool concepts, but I think it's really held back by its technical limitations. It's a decent game, but it's not the best game out there, and that kind of sits well with me. I'd say it's above those that I've put below it. I'd say it's better than Revenant Wings, but it's not as good as 13 and 13 too. I'm happy to put it there. The Bravest, bottom of D tier, moving on. So we're gonna go into Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, The Crystal Bearers, while I just powder my face down so that my shadows all blend properly. Now, Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Crystal Bearers is one of the few Final Fantasies that I haven't played. So I'm actually going off of my community's kind of response to Crystal Bearers. I will say, however, that I really like a lot of the music in this game. So I really enjoy the kinds of ways it presents itself. I think the main character is quite likable. I liked Kais in it. But the thing is, my knowledge of Crystal Bearers comes from all of the other products that feature Crystal Bearers characters. So mobile games, card game, spin-off titles, stuff like that. But from the sounds of it, it's quite an unremarkable game. So I will put it under Four Heroes of Light, but feel free to judge accordingly, because I can't go off of my own opinion with this one. So it either goes here or it goes in placeholder. But for argument's sake, I'm going to put it above 12 Revenant Wings. So now we're going to go into Crystal Chronicles. Now, this game was actually really fun. Like, I don't know if anyone played this, but it was released on PlayStation 3, I believe. Or that's where I played it anyway. And it's a tower defense title. I'm just mapping out this design on my face, and yellow's not going to do it. But I actually quite liked this. It was really cute. It was really fun. I would say it's not quite as good as Four Heroes of Light or the games above it, but I'd say it's a solid B tier game. I'd say it's a solid B tier game. And then I'm going to move straight into Chocobo GP. Chocobo GP, I'm going to put at the bottom of C tier. I would put it lower because of its horrendous monetization, but they have since changed that, and the game itself is actually quite fun. So I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to put it in C tier. Right, so we now have the other two Chocobo games here. I'm sure there's a couple of Chocobo games that I've missed here, and we've got Fables coming up later, but I think there are sequels to Chocobo's Mystery Dungeon and to Fables that I don't have here, so do forgive me if I've missed those. But Chocobo Racing, I'd say it was cute back on the PS1. It was fine. There was a lot to it, and you had, you know, unlockables and things like that, but it was quite bare bones. So I'd put it squarely in the C tier. Like, I'd probably put it next to GP, in fact. I don't think it's better than 15, 2, or 3. That's kind of my metric for the C tier stuff. Is it better than those three? As a matter of fact, I probably wouldn't put Revenant Wings better than those three either. Crystal Bearers, I don't know. So that one, I'm actually going to put that below it as well, because I don't think anything in the C tier is better than those three. And that joining that's going to be Chocobo's Mystery Dungeon. I know that Mystery Dungeon games have a following. Like, I know that people really like Mystery Dungeon games. Like, I know that Pokemon's got a really big following for it. I've played Chocobo's Mystery Dungeon, and I never finished it. I played a lot of it. It just felt like I was doing the same thing over and over and over again. And I just don't think very highly of it. But I wonder if other people would place this higher than I would, because I know that Mystery Dungeon has a following. Because I've played Pokemon Mystery Dungeon and found that was boring as well. So would I recommend it to others based on the criteria that I set at the beginning of this video? No, but you might, and I'd love to hear from you if you do. So here is a particularly spicy one. Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. Now, I was very well known for my coverage of this game for a very long time. But if you had asked me 3 years ago, I would have said B tier. Which is interesting, because obviously I was very heavily into it. At its heyday, I'd have said high B tier. I would not have played Dissidia Final Fantasy over FF8 or 4. But I would have recommended it to other people. So I would have put it in high B tier. Now, I struggle to find a way to put it anywhere higher than here. Maybe even... Would I recommend it over FF2, 5, and 4, 2, 3, and 4? 550? No, I wouldn't. No, I don't think I would. The reason being is because I think there's too much going on. I would not recommend this to a new player. It is a mobile title. It is a gacha title. It is more generous than most gacha titles, absolutely. Would I suggest somebody pick this game up now over one of the games I've put above it? No, I don't think I would. But I think for the benefit of the doubt and the time where I would have done and the amount of time that I really enjoyed it, I think I'd actually put it probably here. So in that case, with that that kind of, you know, logical or logic, well, as logical as you can get with a very subjective tier list. Do not hate me. I'm sure that people are going to send me hate for Opera Omnia, my placement of that. I'm going to average it out and I'm going to put it here. So I'm going to put it somewhere between where I would have put it at the beginning, somewhere where I would put it now. I don't think I would recommend it to people now, but I do think that it has definitely had its time in the sun. Dissidia Final Fantasy NT, I would put literally straight above where I put Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia now. Dissidia NT gets a lot of hate. Deservedly so. It does. As a matter of fact, I'm going to put it one below Opera Omnia, because I actually think I find it hilarious that Opera Omnia was more successful than NT was. But I don't think NT was actually a bad game. I actually don't. Like, if you play it the way it's intended, which I think was the issue a lot of people had, they didn't want to play it that way. I think that it's, you know, it's actually really fun. If you get a group of people together, there were a few times where I got with people and played it, and I had a lot of fun for a lot of hours. But the netcode was hideous and the single player sucked. So it can't be any higher than where I've placed it there. The other two Dissidias, I'm going to put them squarely in A tier. In fact, I would put them this high. And I'm going to put them together for the sake of the fact that one's basically an expansion of the other. But you could argue that the story's different. There are differences. I actually am putting Dissidia Final Fantasy above Duodecim very slightly. And I'll tell you why. There was an element of Dissidia that was removed for Duodecim that I really liked. Or at least they changed it really heavily, which was the dual labyrinth. They made it really complicated in Duodecim, and it wasn't complicated in the original. And so while you get all of the really cool extra characters in Duodecim, and the single player is arguably better, I feel that Dissidia Final Fantasy, the original, has a better endgame experience than Duodecim does. Though I'm sure people will argue to the moon with me and back on that, and that is absolutely okay. Just don't play them as if they're competitive fighters, because they aren't. Because if you were, you'd be playing Ultimecia or X-Death, and that'd be the end of it. But if you treat them for what they are, they're really good games, and I'd love to see them come back remastered. So, Dirge of Cerberus. I'm sure... I'm just putting Eyeshadow Primer on. I am sure that people really like Dirge of Cerberus. I think that those people are incorrect. I still think it's better than After Years. I think it's better than After Years. But it's not a good game. I'm sorry. The story is trash. Deep Ground is just watered down Foxhound from Metal Gear Solid. The only character I like in that game, I think, is Shulk. And I don't even like her that much. I think she's okay. I would say that these two are interchangeable, because I just think they're just such nothing games. Dirge of Cerberus is just odd. If you really love Dirge of Cerberus, please do let me know in comments or anything like that, because I'd love to hear from you. So, next on the list is going to be Air Guides. Now, I speak to loads of people that seem to really, really love that game, and I don't personally quite understand why. I don't get the love for this game, because I've played it. I've played it quite a lot. I unlocked Sephiroth, all of it, and Zack, and everything. It's not a good game. It's just not. It's like Masters of Teräs bad. So I would put it pretty low down, but I'd probably say that I would play this over Dirge Cerberus or After Years on the back of what kind of game it is. But I don't understand where the love for this game comes from. But I would like to know, maybe I should play it again in more recent times. Maybe it's aged well and I've just not been aware of it. But I don't think it's a particularly good game, do you? Okay, so we have Crystal Chronicles Echoes of Time here, which was not a massive release. It was on the DS, and I think it was on another console as well. I think it was on the Wii as well as the DS, but I don't think it was bad. It was okay. I'd put it in a solid C tier. It was the Wii. It was the Wii. I'd say it was better than Revenant Wings, but not as good as the mainline titles I put in C tier. And honestly, it's getting to a point now where I'm getting a little bit concerned that I haven't really put anything of these spin-off titles, except for Dissidia, even in A tier. Nothing has come close to touching these guys up at the top. So now we've got our first, well, actually it's the last expansion for FF14, which is Endwalker. So Endwalker has actually made me like readjust some of my stuff here. I'm actually going to move 7 up to S tier. I did say at the beginning of the video that I think that 7, or like that some of the tiers will change because of the volume of stuff in them, and 7 goes up to S tier for that. The question is, do I like Endwalker more than 16? I don't think I like it as much as 7, so it's either here or here. And I think I'm putting it there, which means it's the first S tier game I'm putting up there. That does also make me wonder if I'm putting 16 up there as well. No, I think I'm happy with it right now, but I think I like Endwalker more than 16. Purely because of the volume of content in it, and I think that they do a really good job. No, do you know what? I don't. I think I do prefer 16. So in that case, I'm actually going to do that. Yeah, I think Endwalker at the top of A tier and 16 at the bottom of S tier, that sits well to me. Purely because Endwalker, I think, has the same things as 16 in that when it lands amazingly. But I feel that Endwalker's end is a little bit of an anticlimax. Like, I think Meteon is a bit of a Deus Ex Machina, just like a lot of villains in Final Fantasy, but with a 10-year payoff, it's just not something that I really appreciated. Chocobo Fables, I'm not a fan particularly, but I think it's funny because all the Chocobo games kind of sit together. I don't think there's like Chocobo Tales is very, very nothing. It's not. I wouldn't say it was actively bad like First Soldier or After Years or anything like that. In fact, as a matter of fact, I would put it. I'm gonna put it down here. I'm gonna put it down here because I think I'd rather play it than After Years, but not more than Dirge Cerberus. But I'd say it was pretty close to the bottom. So for those of you who don't know Final Fantasy Explorers, it's kind of like a Monster Hunter style game, like a multiplayer focused monster hunting game. And it was cute, but from what I remember of it, it got quite repetitive quite quickly. So I would have said, and speaking to people in the chat and everything, I'd say it was probably about here. I'd say it's high C tier, not quite B tier. I think it's very enjoyable, and yeah, it's not bad, but it's not anything special. It's forgettable, which when in this pantheon, as I said with a couple of games earlier, if it's forgettable, that's a death sentence in this kind of list. So now we've got Crisis Core, while I apply more orange to this look. I think that this is probably going to be one that's very much a hot take, because people love Crisis Core. They really love Crisis Core. I personally believe it to be the most overrated Final Fantasy out of possibly all of them. I think that Zack is a cool character. I think that initially the combat can be really fun, and Reunion does a really good job of making it a little bit better, or better than it was on the PSP version. However, it's still extremely repetitive if you're it's very easily broken. Like, you can break yourself right at the beginning of the game, which I love. That actually gives it plus points to me, which is why 8 is where it is. But I would not rather play this game than 4 or 8. I don't think, and I do think a lot of the characters in Crisis Core that are not from FF7, so Cisne, Genesis, and Jill, I don't think any of them are particularly good characters. So I think the game's good. I don't think it's better than 4 or 8. So Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, or Remake 2, obviously isn't out yet, so we're going to put that straight in the placeholder. I put it in there because I wanted to be able to revisit this list later when games like Ever Crisis, Rebirth 2, 7.0, if we start hearing about it for FF14. I wanted to make this like an evergreen list, something that I could then come back to later. But we now come to the next mobile title, which is Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. Final Fantasy Brave Exvius I would put probably about here. When the game first came out, like the first couple of years, and this is actually something that's very common among live service titles and mobile titles, particularly gacha ones, is when the game first came out, I'd have arguably put it here. But as time goes on, it got more money hungry, it got more like complicated, the numbers started going out of control. The story at the beginning was actually pretty good. The first season of story of Final Fantasy Brave Exvius was actually alright. Rain and Laswell and Fina were cool characters. The Veritas were cool characters. When it started going into like Hio and like, was it Physalis or whatever her name is? That kind of goes a bit crazy. And then when you take the story out, you're just left with the gacha stuff. And yeah, I can't in good conscience put FFBE any higher than here. Honestly, due to its monetization, I should put it down here. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles is next. So I'm going to ignore the fact that the remaster botched the multiplayer so badly. Fun fact, I reviewed the remaster of Crystal Chronicles and I had an early access code for it, which meant that I didn't know quite how botched the multiplayer was. So I did this review going, yeah, it feels just like the original. It's really good. Really enjoyed it. Obviously, there was no one online or anything to play with, so I didn't know quite how bad that was going to be. But I think there's a lot of nostalgia and a lot of fond memories of Crystal Chronicles. So you feel free to place this based on the remaster version or the original. But going off of the original, I would put it mid-B tier. I think if you had the people around to play it, it was really fun. Playing it on your own is awful, honestly. It's not fun. But I do think that there's a lot of like happy memories to be had with that game. I would put it on a similar level to where I've put Crisis Core. Which is ironic because it's FF7CC and FFCC. They like their Cs when it comes to Final Fantasy games. You know, but I wouldn't say it was any better than that. Now we have Final Fantasy Dimensions. Final Fantasy Dimensions is actually quite good. Like, it's a mobile title, but it's it's like a single purchase mobile title. It goes on sale quite a lot as well, which is quite nice. We like it when they do that. And the stories in them are actually quite good. Like, it's the first mention of like Warriors of Darkness, and the characters like Aegis and Sol are actually pretty solid, and the gameplay is very similar to Final Fantasy V in the way that the job system works. So I would actually put these mid-B tier, actually. It's Dimensions 2 above Dimensions 1. I've only played these fairly recently, but if they go on sale and you've not heard of these, as like some of my like chatters down here haven't, I'd definitely give them a go. So Final Fantasy Record Keeper. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I actually think that Record Keeper is the strongest mobile title that we've had. The gacha in it is abysmal. It is bad, so that's why it will never be any higher than B tier. But I think it had the strongest end game. It had a strong permanence to its end game. I think it captured the essence of Final Fantasy better than most, if not all, other Final Fantasies. I think that it just had so much going for it, but the only thing that really holds it back is its gacha, but it holds it back pretty heavily. So, and you obviously can't play it anymore. So I'm actually going to put it ever so slightly, and people are going to read me to filth for this, above Dissidia Opera Omnia. And like I said, I know that people are going to come for me by putting that. But I really wish that more people had experienced Record Keeper, because I do genuinely believe that it's a really good game. And really, ultimately, that's what we're basing this metric on. Would I recommend it to people now? No, obviously not, because you can't play it. So that would be a very difficult recommendation now, wouldn't it? But I do think that it had a legacy. It lasted for a really long time. I think it's still going in Japan. I think it's still running over there. This one's nice and easy. Tactics. Now, I think that everyone, almost everyone, would agree with me that if there is a spin-off title that deserves to be in S tier, it's this one. The story for this game is immaculate. Immaculate. If you like Clive from 16, go play Tactics. You'll like Ramza as well. The politics, the story, this is exactly where everything comes into play really beautifully in Tactics. I hope that these rumours of a remake are real, because I think that Tactics deserves everything. I think it's one of the strongest games out of all of them, and I very nearly put it in my main list line because it should be one if it's not. All of the characters are really good. If I could see half the characters in Final Fantasy have the depth of characters like Ovelia, Orlando, Agrius, Delita. The world building in Tactics is amazing and expanded upon in other games like 12, Vagrant Story even. I was very, very close to putting Vagrant Story in this list because it's one of my favourite games ever. But it's not a Final Fantasy as much as I want it to be one. It isn't one. But Tactics, I can't think of many games that Tactics isn't better than. And for that reason, maybe people will disagree with me and they'd put it below the likes of 5, 9, and 7. But I actually think it's aged really surprisingly well as well. So it's a bit of a slow burn, but what good RPG isn't? If you haven't played Tactics, do yourself a favor and go and do it now. Okay, Final Fantasy TCG. Because I decided I would put this in here because I spent a lot of time on FFTCG, and it is a Final Fantasy game. Yeah, I'm sure there's other like traditional games as well, but this one I decided to put in there because it's still ongoing at this moment in time. I'd put it squarely in B tier, I think. I would rather play it than Dimensions and Dimensions 2. And probably Crystal Chronicles, but I wouldn't rather play it than the stuff above it. Would I recommend it to players now? Possibly. It's got an existing player base of very nice people. I'm actually trying, I might ruin this look completely, by the way, as I'm doing this, because FF16's Phoenix has blue and turquoise in it, and I want to incorporate that, so I'm using the under eye to do it, and this might completely ruin the look, but we're doing it anyway. But I think that it's a very rich game, FFTCG. I think it's very rich. I think it has a lot of depth to it. I would argue that it possibly has too much depth to it. But I think it's a good game, and I think that people who give it a chance will probably find something that they really like in it. FF7 G-Bike, we don't need to go into it. This goes down here. Like, it's a nothing game. It is. Like, I mean, this and snowboarding as well. I only didn't make a snowboarding icon because I'm lumping it in with G-Bike. They were silly. They were cute, but they weren't anything. They were just random games. So, yeah, no, I can't put it any higher than that. Heaven's Ward. Now, Heaven's Ward is really good. It is really good. Do I think it's... I don't think it's any lower than A tier. Let's just put it that way. Do I think it's better than 12? Yeah. Yeah. Do I think it's better than Dissidia? I think so. Do I think it's better than 7 Remake? Honestly, no. And I definitely don't think it's better than Endwalker. Other people, I'm sure, will contend me with this, and they'd probably put it in S tier, because I know that people who play Endwalker have a lot to say about Endwalker. It does also mean that I'm going to need to move 14 away from S tier, because if we're putting the expansions in, we're going to treat 14 as a Realm Reborn. At which point, I really don't think a Realm Reborn is particularly strong, but it's still strong enough, so I would put it all the way down here. I think that a Realm Reborn takes so long to get going that it puts so many players off. They've streamlined it, so I put it higher than I would have put it originally. I would have put it all the way down to where 13 was originally, which I'm sure is heresy for a lot of people. But if we're treating that 14 icon there as just a Realm Reborn, I wouldn't put it above 4 or 8 or 12 or anything above it. Heaven's Ward is where it started to hit its stride. And then Endwalker, I definitely think is a really good payoff, but I wouldn't put any of them individually above the games that I've got in S tier there. Collectively, 14 is absolutely up here with 10. Absolutely up here with 10, if not surpassing 10. But with just a Realm Reborn, I'm going to put it just above Crisis Core, because the game is still really good. It's huge. It created a community. The achievement of a Realm Reborn is massive. Because if we were talking 1.0, it'd be down here, girl. It'd be all the way down here. But we're not talking about 1.0, because you can't play 1.0 now. So I'm going to put 14, a Realm Reborn there in B tier, high B tier, and Heaven's Ward in high A tier. I think Lightning Returns is stronger than both 13 and 13 too. So I would say it would be above FF1 and also above the Dimensions games. So I would put it middle of B tier. I don't think it's better than Crystal Chronicles. I don't think it's better than TCG or Crisis Core. But I think it's a really underrated game. I think that Lightning Returns is actually very good. You have to kind of get past the time mechanics and stuff, and a lot of people aren't willing to do that. And I respect that. It can create stress for a player when they don't want it. But there's actually a lot of reward to playing Lightning Returns, and I think a lot of the references it makes are really cool. I think that a lot of the, you know, dressing up Lightning and her doing her bit, it was really fun. I really enjoyed Lightning Returns, and I can't really say much more about it than that. Got another mobile title here with Final Fantasy Mobius Final Fantasy. I don't really like Mobius. I tried it. I even spent some money on it, and I found that Mobius was just the most unapproachable game. It had so many unnecessary mechanics in it that didn't make any sense, and it was really money hungry as well. So I'd actually say this is one of the worst mobile titles. Is it worse than First Soldier or All the Bravest? No. I mean, it was very pretty. Or maybe I'll just put it above Fables then. It was pretty, but that was literally all it had. It was all style, no substance. I just couldn't get on with that game at all. And when it was charging you like 80 quid to do pulls on it, mama no. All right, so now we've got Mystic Quest. I feel really bad because I actually really like Mystic Quest. I only played it quite recently. I played it and I actually really liked it, but I can't in good conscience put it above 2 and 3 when it's got a lot of flaws to it, because it does. But I really liked Mystic Quest, so it feels wrong putting it really low. If I was being like personal about it, I'd probably put it like up here somewhere because I really enjoyed it. But I certainly don't think it's better than 15. I think maybe I might be being a bit too harsh on 15. I'm going to move it up a few. My issue with 15 is how unfinished it is. I'm going to move it up a few. I'm not going to move it up loads. But I'm going to put it there. I think I'm going to move 15 up a little bit. With just the mainline titles, I'm happy with where I'd left it originally. But when you start adding everything in, I think 15 needs to go a little higher. I think, maybe I'm being too harsh on it. Because it just frustrates me. The thing with 15 is the idea of wasted potential. And I see that in 15 so hard. I do also see it in 13. I just like the combat in 13 a lot more, and I think it's a lot more well fleshed out. And if you take the trilogy as a whole, I really liked it, but I do think that maybe 15, perhaps I was being a bit too harsh on it. But Mystic Quest is cute, it's fun, it's silly. You can't take it too seriously, and for that, I really like it. But to put it any higher than where it is, I think would just be wrong. So now we have Crystal Chronicles, My Life as a Dark Lord, and My Life as King. They are okay. they're okay. I wouldn't say that they were great. They were very much throwaway titles. They were WiiWare games, if anyone remembers WiiWare. But they're kind of nothing games. I wouldn't say they were bad. It's just they are ultimately very forgettable. I wouldn't say they were actively bad games. So I think I'm willing to put them at like where the Chocobo games are. But I think I like them more than the Chocobo games. So I'm going to put them around here. Don't hate them. Don't love them. And then I think we've got our last Crystal Chronicles game here, which is Ring of Fates. I think this is one of the better ones. I think that Ring of Fates probably sits around here somewhere, I would say. I'd say Ring of Fates sits... I think it's better than Echoes of Time. This is the game that has Yuri and Chelinka in it. And I like the story in this game quite a lot, and I like the final boss fights and stuff. I think that Ring of Fates was actually really fun. But I don't think it's better than Dissidia, NT, or Opera Omnia. I think there's quite a lot there that I do like. But yeah, it's not my favorite. Next on the list is Final Fantasy 15, A New Empire, and Final Fantasy 15, Monster of the Deep. I can't put that any higher than that. Like, no, I'm sorry. They are bad. I know there's a second A New Empire as well. Is it War for Eos? I'm lumping that in with A New Empire. They're the same bloody game. Cheap knockoff, crappy mobile title, just nothing. And Monster of the Deep, I'm sure it's not too like bad, but it made me feel ill, and I've played plenty of VR games, but it just felt so nothing. It's such a pointless addition. It's just like, why bother? Why bother? And that's why, and it annoys me enough that I would put it that low down on the tier list, because the fact that it even exists annoys me. So, enough with that. We're over it. A New Empire and War for Eos, though, those are, I would even argue they're worse than All the Bravest. I would even argue that it was worse than All the Bravest. Yeah, do you know what? I would, because it angers me that much. Okay, so next on the list is Ever Crisis, and that's not out yet, so that's going in the placeholder section. I'm also going to put Before Crisis here as well, because you can't really play it. But fun fact, I have played Before Crisis, because I played it on like an emulator years ago for something, because you couldn't play it because it was only released in Japan. It's really nothing special. It's really nothing to write home about, so if you haven't played it, I certainly wouldn't lose sleep over it. It's a very much a nothing game. But then next on the list is going to be World of Final Fantasy. World of Final Fantasy, I'd say that's a B tier game. I'd say it's a B tier game. I'd put it below 1 and the Dimensions games. I don't like the characters in World at all. I don't like the characters in World at all. I think that they're weird. They are quirky for the sake of quirky. There's a lot of grinding in that game. A lot of grinding in that game. And I just wish I loved it. I wish I loved it, but I got bored very quickly. I'm actually working on a platinum for World of Final Fantasy with my friends at the moment. And it's grindy as hell. It's so grindy. It's painful. So for that reason, I don't think it's above any of the other games that I've got here. But I think other people would probably place this higher. Okay, so the last of the mobile games that we have here today is going to be Final Fantasy Brave Exvius War of the Visions. I played War of the Visions for about a year. Fun fact, I was actually credited in that game for a while. But I don't think it's very good, if I'm honest. I think its presentation is wonderful, but I just think it's too grindy. I think it's too grindy, and I think it's actually worse than Brave Exvius for the same thing. I know it's like the promise of War of the Visions was really, really high, but it just ended up not being what I wanted it to be. And you know, they knew what they were doing. They were getting like the Tactics fans to come in because they had Tactics characters. They started getting characters from other Final Fantasies and Brave Exvius itself. It looked promising, it did, but I think that and the story's actually not terrible either. But I just think it just could have been so much better than it was. And it was money hungry as hell, like really money hungry. All right, So now we have the big one. I'll scroll down so you can see which ones we've got left. We've got Shadowbringers, Stranger Paradise, Stormblood, Type 0, Tactics Advanced, Tactics Advanced 2, Theatrhythm Curtain Call, Theatrhythm Final Bar Line, and 10-2. So Shadowbringers. I will not be taking questions at this time. I will not be taking any questions at this time. Shadowbringers is the single best Final Fantasy experience, period. Period. I think that Shadowbringers just has so much. The story is self-contained and yet explores all the themes from the other games in 14. I think that the characters are the best that they've ever had. Emmett Selk, come on now. Come on now. I think Shadowbringers deserves every accolade it has. I disagree. One video I actually thought about making is reacting to Metacritic scores for Final Fantasy games, or for games in general, because I think Endwalker's actually rated higher than Shadowbringers, which I do not agree with in any way, shape, or form. Shadowbringers is as close to perfect for a Final Fantasy experience as you can get. The only issue, of course, is that you have to play through A Realm Reborn first. But it's just perfection. It's just perfection. And it's the reason that if I put all of the games together for 14 is at the top of the list as well. But while we're on the 14 train, shall we get the last FF14 expansion done out the way? Which is Stormblood. Now, I didn't play Final Fantasy XIV when Heavensward first came out. I'm going to place this just below Heavensward. Just below. I think a lot of people really don't like Stormblood. I actually do. I think Stormblood is fantastic. I personally enjoy the story for Stormblood more than Heavensward, which is very contentious, and I completely understand that. But I think the post-patch content for Stormblood, you know, all of the stuff with Tsuyu and Tsukuyomi, everything like that, I think was fantastic. But I do agree that the MSQ for Stormblood is a bit weirdly paced, and Xenos isn't nearly as compelling as a lot of the characters that came after him. Certainly not Emmett Selk. But I do think that there's a lot to love in Stormblood, so I don't really understand why it gets the disdain that it does. So now we've got Stranger of Paradise. Now, Stranger of Paradise is an interesting one. Right now I'm going to try and put some shimmer in the highlights, like the brow bone, in the center of various different places I've got here, so we'll get the pop of color. That's the ticket. That's the ticket. That's what we're talking about. I think that Stranger of Paradise deserves to be in high B tier. I think I like it more than A Realm Reborn, but I don't like it any more than the games that I'd put above it. I think that it was fun. The only issue that I have with it was that there's too many layers of gear. Like, when you're trying to gear out late game, it just doesn't... It tries too hard. And Neo suffered the same issue, which makes a lot of sense because it's the same developers. And it's basically Final Fantasy Neo, isn't it? But I still liked it, and I thought the DLC was very cool, where they were trying to kind of like integrate the Dissidia franchise into it. I thought that was cute. But I definitely don't think it's better than 4 or 8. I think I liked it more than A Realm Reborn, though. That's probably something that that people won't agree with. And I think that a lot of people will probably disagree with just Stranger of Paradise being a decent game, period. But I do think that it deserves the credit. I think it deserves more credit than it sometimes gets. All right, so we have Type 0. Now, this one's another one that I think people are going to argue with me over, because I know it's got a really big following, but I really didn't care for Type 0. I thought that the HD version made the camera janky and it made the game look ugly. I thought that the story was okay at best. The characters almost entirely forgettable, except for the villains. Like, Sid Olstein was cool. More on that on another video. But other than that, I just didn't care for Type 0 very much. So I'm either wanting to put it at the bottom of B tier or the top of C tier. Because I definitely don't like it more than 15. I definitely don't like it more than 15. I don't think I like it more than Dissidia, Opera Omnia, or NT either. Yeah, I think there is where I want to put it. And I'm fairly sure that people are going to come for me on my placement for that one. But after talking to people here, and also sort of like playing it myself, I just thought it was boring. And maybe at some point I'll go back to it, but for the time being, Nah, it's a C tier game for me. Final Fantasy X-2. We're coming to the end of the list now. Thank you very much for sticking with me this long. I did warn everyone that this was going to be a long video by the end, but we're getting there. Now, X-2, I think, has a terrible story. I think it's absolute hot garbage. But I think that its use of the ATB gauge is arguably the best that there's ever been for the ATB gauge. And so for that reason, I actually think X-2 deserves to be either here or here. Because if you go back and play it, it's actually extremely fun. And that's one of the things that I like. In fact, I'm going to put it in A tier. I'm going to put it in A tier, mainly because my B tier is too clogged up. Which then makes me think, to be honest, because the benchmarks have always been these two, I'm going to move these two up as well. Yeah, I'm happy with that placement. I think X-2 is actually extremely fun. The music is great. The end game is great. The story is poor. It is poor, and a lot of the newer characters are a bit janky. So I'm actually going to put it. I'm going to put it below 4. I think the bottom of A tier. Yeah, I think that's a nice place for that to sit. And moving some of those around, like I said, I would change some of the other ones based on the volume of what else is there. I would agree with. A bit overloaded with mini games, and not all of them are hits, but the LeBlanc Massage was amazing, and it was fun, and it didn't take itself too seriously, and for that, I appreciate it. And I'm gonna actually have a little bit of a shuffle around here, because in hindsight, I think I actually like 12 more than Stormblood and the Dissidias. I do think 12 is amazing. Like, some of my chat have been saying, oh no, 12 deserves to be higher. I'm like, actually, yeah, it does. It does, because it is amazing. And I also think that Record Keeper deserves to be a smidge lower. And then Theatrhythms, I'm going to put Theatrhythm, Curtain Call. I haven't included the original Theatrhythm because Curtain Call is literally just an improvement on it in every way. I'm going to put it here. I love it because it is a celebration of everything Final Fantasy. But it doesn't come close to the final bar line. Final bar line I'm putting here. And I will not take questions at this time. Final bar line, I think, is the number of times that I welled up and started like tears streaming down my face playing this game is perfection in terms of how it celebrates the franchise. The number of tracks that are in it, the range of difficulty in it. The problem with Curtain Call, and the reason that it's not higher on my list, I also haven't put All-Star Carnival in there, and I realise that now. But tough. But I think that Curtain Call is too easy. I think it is too easy. But as a celebration of the franchise, I don't think you get much better than Final Bar Line. It's just so beautiful. 2 games left before we have a completed, well, as complete as we can get list, which is Tactics Advance and Tactics Advance 2. Now, this might be a hot take. I genuinely think that Tactics Advance deserves to be all the way up here. Genuinely. Don't ask me why. Well, actually, I suppose you can ask me why. I think that it deserves to be that high because the story for Tactics Advance is magical. It's so heartfelt. The characters in the game are brilliant. I'm doing a tier list of SIDs, so I'm just going to let you know that now. But I'm doing a tier list of SIDs, and I think that Judge Master Sid Randall, is one of the best ones out of them all. He is such a wonderful character. He's so full of heart, full of love. And the story is very relatable because of the ways in which it parallels real life. And it's like, if you were sucked into Ivalice, if you were put into a story like that, how would you react? Would you ever want to leave? Would you want to get out? The story of, or the discussion amongst the community of whether Marsh is actually a bad guy because he's trying to pull his friend out back into reality when he doesn't really want to, because in reality he's crippled. He's not able to live life the way he could in a fantasy. I think it's magical. I love Tactics Advance. Is it as deep and rich as Tactics War of the Lions? No. That's primarily on gameplay. The gameplay is simplified slightly because it's a GBA game and it's appealing to a different market. But I really do believe that TA deserves to be that high on the list. I prefer it to Remake. I prefer it to Endwalker. I prefer it to 12. You guys may disagree with me on that, and I encourage you to do so. But I really love Tactics Advanced, and I think that people, if they gave it a chance, they'd love it too. TA2, I would say it's high B. I'd say it's a high B tier game. I still think it's really good, but I don't think it's even close to Tactics Advanced. Not even close. Like, the characters just aren't as lovable. Luso is fine. Ilua is fine. Adele, etc. They're all good characters, but I don't think it's even got a smidge on Tactics Advanced 1. So that's everything. That is 70 Final Fantasy games ranked. I'm sure I've missed a couple, and I'm sure that there are going to be some hot takes in this video that you guys are probably going to absolutely tear me to shreds over. And if you do, please feel free to. I've really enjoyed making this list. I've gone for FF16, Phoenix, Mardi Gras look whilst I was doing it. Let me know in the comments below where your list would be, or even better yet, I will leave a link to this tier list that I've made for you to make your own tier maker for it. So definitely leave a comment in the comments below with a link to your list. I'd love to hear from other people and see what their lists look like. But for now, that's going to be all from me. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notifications on future videos. And that's going to be it from me. Take care, everyone. Hope you have a wonderful day. Bye now.